Growing up under the expansive skies of Flagstaff, Arizona, my fascination with the cosmos was kindled from a young age. My father, an amateur astronomer and a high school physics teacher, introduced me to the stars. Together, we would spend countless evenings in our backyard, him with a cup of black coffee in hand and me with a notebook, as he named constellations and explained the physics of celestial bodies. Those nights under the stars were not just lessons in astronomy. They were my refuge, a time when the universe seemed to unfold just for me. As I grew older, this fascination turned into a passionate hobby. The telescope, a gift from my father on my 15th birthday, became my most prized possession. It was through its lens that I felt closest to the mysteries of the universe, seeking answers in the light of distant galaxies. On that particular night in late October, the sky was a canvas of cosmic wonders. The air was clear, free of the summer's dusty haze, offering an unobstructed view of the heavens. The Milky Way stretched across the sky, a river of stars that seemed to bisect the universe. Away from the city's light pollution, each star was a point of light, sharp and clear, against the velvety darkness. The crescent moon hung low on the horizon, a thin sliver of silver that cast a gentle light over the landscape. It was a night made for stargazing, one that promised the kind of celestial spectacle that had first drawn me to astronomy. The constellations of autumn were on full display, from the great square of Pegasus to the hero Andromeda, each telling its ancient story in the language of stars. My goal was to locate the Andromeda galaxy, our cosmic neighbor, its light a bridge connecting us to the vast universe beyond our own. As I adjusted the telescope, a sudden flash caught my attention. It wasn't the gentle twinkle of a star, but a sharp, intense burst of light that seemed to come from nowhere. Intrigued, I redirected my telescope towards the source of the flash, but before I could locate it again, a low humming sound filled the air. The sound was unlike anything I had heard before. It wasn't mechanical or electronic, but organic, as if the night itself had found a voice. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees in a matter of seconds, wrapping me in an unnatural chill. My breath formed clouds of vapor in the air, and I rubbed my arms for warmth, questioning whether I should retreat inside. But my curiosity was piqued, and I was compelled to stay, to understand the source of the flash and the peculiar humming. As I scanned the sky, the flash occurred again, this time followed by a series of lights that blinked in sequence, not unlike Morse code. The lights didn't belong to any aircraft I was familiar with. Their movement was too erratic, darting across the sky with impossible speed before coming to an abrupt halt directly above my house. The humming intensified, vibrating through my chest, and the array of lights began to descend, slowly at first, then picking up speed as they approached the ground. Panic set in, but I was frozen, my feet glued to the porch, my eyes locked on the descending lights. The descent of the lights from the night sky stirred a blend of excitement and trepidation within me. The lights, which at first appeared as mere aberrations against the backdrop of an otherwise familiar nightscape, now commanded my undivided attention. They descended with a precision and intent that seemed to defy conventional understanding of aircraft movements. The sequence of their illumination suggested a form of communication or navigation, a methodical pattern that hinted at intelligence and purpose. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I realized I was observing what could only be classified as a UFO, an actual unidentified flying object, in real time. Nothing in my experience or readings had prepared me for the visceral reality of witnessing such an anomaly firsthand. The humming sound, which had initially piqued my curiosity, now enveloped me in a cocoon of sound, its vibrations resonating with the very air around me. The sound seemed to draw the night closer, as if the sky itself was descending upon my home. The temperature drop was immediate and pronounced, turning my breath into plumes of vapor in the night air, adding a surreal quality to the scene unfolding before me. This drop wasn't the gentle decline. It was a rapid plunge, as if the atmosphere itself was being altered by the presence of the lights. My skepticism was replaced by a flood of questions and a keen desire to document what I was witnessing. Racing back inside, I grabbed my camera, repurposed in an attempt to capture evidence of this unprecedented encounter. As I fumbled with the camera settings, trying to adjust for the low light and movement, I realized that my hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from a profound sense of excitement and fear. The lights' movement as they began their descent was unlike any aircraft known to civilian aviation. They moved in unison, yet each light seemed to operate independently, darting back and forth with nimble agility before aligning into a formation directly above my house. This behavior, coupled with the absence of any sound aside from the pervasive hum, challenged my understanding of physics and aviation. The way they then began to circle, creating a perimeter of light around my property, felt deliberate, as though they were surveying the area, or perhaps me. As the lights converged, forming a luminescent barrier above, the night was pierced by their brilliance, casting an otherworldly glow on the ground below. The air within this illuminated enclosure grew denser, charged with an energy that seemed almost electric, making the hair on my arms stand on end. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the lights shot upwards, disappearing into the night sky, leaving behind a deafening silence. I stood there, shivering, not from the cold but from fear and awe. The normal sounds of the night seemed muffled, distant, as if I were underwater. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. Was it a military experiment, a meteorological phenomenon, or something far beyond our understanding? The next day, I searched the internet for any reports of strange lights or sounds in the area but found nothing. It was as if the event had occurred only for me, a personal encounter with the unknown. I reached out to local astronomy clubs and forums, sharing my experience in hopes of finding someone else who had seen the lights, but my queries were met with skepticism or outright dismissal. As weeks turned into months, the memory of that night began to fade, softened by the rational part of my mind that sought logical explanations. Yet, every time I looked up at the stars, a part of me wondered, a part of me feared, what lies beyond the comforting blanket of our atmosphere. It was late July in small-town Arizona, the kind of place where the sunsets paint the sky in hues of orange and purple so vivid you'd swear it was a scene straight out of a high-definition nature documentary. I'm Jake, and back then, I was spending my summer break from college just chilling at home, working part-time at the local diner, and hanging out with my buddy, Marco. Our town was peaceful, almost boringly so, with the biggest event being the annual 4th of July parade. But that summer, something happened that changed my perception of our sleepy town forever. One evening, after closing up the diner, Marco and I decided to drive out to the desert outskirts for some stargazing. We packed a cooler with some sodas, grabbed a couple of fold-out chairs, and headed off. The desert at night was a different world. The oppressive heat of the day gave way to a chilling breeze, and the vast, open sky was a blanket of stars so dense it felt like we could reach out and touch them. We found our usual spot, an open area just off a seldom-used dirt road, set up our chairs, and kicked back. The only sounds were the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant yowl of a coyote. It was the kind of serene quiet that made you feel like you were the only two people left on Earth. As we sat there, lost in conversation and the beauty of the cosmos, Marco pointed out something odd in the distance, a faint, pulsating light. It wasn't a plane or a satellite. It was too erratic, moving in patterns that defied explanation. Curiosity piqued. We were thinking maybe it was some kids messing around with drones or something. We packed up quickly and drove toward the light. As we got closer, the light grew brighter and more intense, illuminating the desert in a surreal glow. It was coming from a ravine a few miles off the road, a place neither of us remembered seeing before. Parking the car, we proceeded on foot, the light guiding us like a beacon. The air was still, the earlier breeze gone, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to absorb all sound. We reached the edge of the ravine, and what we saw was beyond comprehension. In the ravine lay a metallic object, partially embedded in the sand. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Sleek, with an almost organic curvature and emitting a soft, pulsating glow. It was otherworldly, and for a moment, we just stood there, awestruck. Then, we heard it, a low, humming sound emanating from the object, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath our feet. The urge to run was there, an instinctual fear of the unknown, but curiosity anchored us to the spot. We edged closer, drawn by the inexplicable allure of the object. That's when we noticed the footprints in the sand, leading away from the object and toward the opposite side of the ravine. They were unlike any human or animal prints. They were too precise, too uniform, with a shape that suggested something, not of this world. The realization hit us simultaneously. The object wasn't just some piece of advanced military tech or a satellite gone off course. It was something else, something alien. The gravity of our discovery, the thrill mixed with an undercurrent of fear, was overwhelming. We followed the footprints, each step taking us deeper into the unknown. The ravine twisted and turned, and with each bend, the sense of being watched grew stronger. Not by someone, but something. The air grew colder, the humming sound louder, and then, just as we rounded a sharp bend, we found its source. Standing there, in the middle of the desert night, was a figure. It was tall, slender, with an elegance to its posture that seemed almost regal. But it was its eyes that held us, a deep, penetrating gaze that seemed to see right through us. It was an encounter that defied logic, an experience that felt both terrifying and mesmerizing. The figure didn't speak, but we felt a communication of sorts, an understanding that we were not to come closer. We stood there, locked in this silent exchange, until the figure turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the desert. The drive back home was a blur of silence and unspoken questions. What had we seen? What did it mean? The certainty of our reality had been shaken, replaced by a nagging feeling that the world was much more mysterious than we ever could have imagined. The next day, we returned to the ravine, driven by a need for answers, but the object and the mysterious figure were gone. There was no sign that anything out of the ordinary had ever happened there, just the unyielding desert landscape, indifferent to our confusion and fear. We never spoke of it again, not even to each other. Alright, settle in because this story takes a few unexpected turns. It was about 2 years ago, a night, or technically very early morning, that I'll never forget. It was around 3 a.m., and I was making my way home along Route 75, a stretch of road near Duck Creek that's usually deserted, save for the occasional passing truck that would rumble by in the dead of night. The sky above was a masterpiece, pitch black and spangled with stars, making the heavens look like a sheet of dark velvet speckled with shimmering glitter. I'm just an average Joe, an IT guy with a penchant for late hours due to my off-kilter work schedule. That particular night, or morning, I was heading back from a server migration that had gone on way longer than anticipated. My car was my temporary sanctuary, the engine's hum and the soft hiss of the radio scanning static my only companions. Bluetooth seemed too much of a hassle to set up, so I was stuck flipping through frequencies in search of a clear signal. As I neared the bend by Duck Creek, something strange happened. It wasn't anything obvious at first. No, it was more subtle, like the air in my car shifted. It's hard to explain, but the atmosphere seemed to thicken, as though charged with an unspoken anticipation. Despite the warmth of the summer night, a chill swept through me, leaving goosebumps cascading down my arms. I leaned forward to fiddle with the air vent, thinking maybe the AC was acting up, but then, out of nowhere, the road in front of me exploded in light. It wasn't the yellowish hue of car headlights. This was like a flash of broad daylight, stark and utterly blinding. In a panic, I slammed on the brakes. My heart was thumping wildly as this immense shadow loomed overhead. The shape was bizarre, akin to a giant, smooth stone, but its edges blurred into the night, making it seem as though it was part of the sky itself. It hovered silently just above the asphalt. So close I felt this inexplicable vibration, more like a deep pressure in my chest than anything audible. Just when I thought I was about to lose my grip on reality, the thing, whatever it was, shot straight up into the sky and vanished. No dramatic exit, no sound barrier breaking, just gone. The sudden silence was broken only by the crackle of the radio and the flickering of my car lights as they steadied themselves. Sitting there, hands glued to the steering wheel, I tried to calm my racing heart, to normalize my breathing. But inside, my mind was sprinting through a million questions with no answers in sight. I didn't get a wink of sleep after that. Every time I shut my eyes, the image of that intense brightness and the overwhelming shadow returned, playing on a loop. The next day, I attempted to recount the ordeal to a buddy over coffee. But as the words spilled out, they sounded like the plot of a cheesy sci-fi flick, the kind you'd mock with friends over a lazy weekend, popcorn in hand. He chuckled, clapped me on the back, and joked about little green men and late-night delusions. But beneath his humor, I sensed his disbelief. It stung, not because I needed him to believe, but because it emphasized just how extraordinary and, frankly, unbelievable my experience had been. Despite the skepticism, I couldn't dismiss what had happened. It was as tangible to me as the coffee cup I held in my hand, as real as the sleep deprivation that hung heavy on my shoulders. That event marked a turning point for me, one that would lead me down paths I never expected to tread. In the following days, driven by a mix of fear and fascination, I began scouring the internet for similar occurrences. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Validation, perhaps, or maybe a logical explanation that would let me chalk up the experience to something mundane, something explainable. What I found instead was a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, eyewitness accounts of unexplained aerial phenomena, and a community of people just as eager and desperate as I was to find answers. Before I knew it, I was drawn into a world far removed from server rooms and software updates. I was stepping into the unknown, armed with nothing but a profound encounter and a need to understand the truth behind what I had seen that night on Route 75.